All right, so I want to make sure I introduce you, and I want you to also introduce yourself.
Okay.
So, Miss Demetra Moore is a certified coach. Let me make sure I get it right. Coach,
Okay.
trainer, consultant, and speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And you enter coaching after working for a Fortune 500 company
Yes.
for your career. So, tell me more, tell the listeners more about uh, that transition from what your life in working for a Fortune 500 company and how you made that transition to becoming a certified coach and trainer.
Well, Constance, it wasn't easy. I'll tell you that, because the job, I got comfortable, and it doesn't make it right or wrong. It just depends what you want in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with my job. I traveled. I had the company card. I could go to the restaurant. You know, the life that people, you see on TV, the person traveling all the time, the nice rental cars, the nice hotels. I had those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't fulfill me. That was what caused me to leave. And the coaching was just something I was doing innate. I had no idea that it was coaching. I was that person that was always intrigued by what brought you to this role. And at that time, people were like, get these people trained and get them moving, right? We don't have time for all this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I just became known as that person. I created my own, I'll say, training manuals. They weren't really manuals to give to anybody. It was just stuff for me, how I learned, questions I asked myself, so I could have my own buy-in as to why I was doing this role or taking on this new project. And from there, my team was just like, well, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it with the people. And that's pretty much what it was. I started going to new hire orientations. And one day, a colleague put a note on my desk and said, you should be a coach. And I'm thinking, sports coach? I don't do any sports. And she was like, no, like a professional development coach. I had no idea what that was. And she sent me to the website for IPEC, which stands for Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. The moment I saw that website, I was like, I'm at home. Like, this is where I should be. And I enrolled like the next day, Constance. I called, spoke to student enrollment. They sent me an email. By the time I got the email, it was the end of day. Next day, I was enrolled as a student. And here I am almost 15 years later. But I will say, for those who are considering leaving, I would tell people just to really give yourself the opportunity to explore what that thing is, because most people just automatically commit. This has to be the all end all. I've been exploring lots of aspects of coaching, through these years. So that, I think that was the biggest hang up for me, is thinking I had to have an absolute, like, I have to do this thing this way. Entrepreneurship is a variety of things. And I had to be okay giving myself the opportunity to explore. So the change was great, but it was challenging to my overall development as a person.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the speech, what I'm hearing too is that you were ready.
Oh, yeah.
You were ready and you were open, because if you're not, and if you're just committed to that place where you're comfortable, then you'll stay there. But you were ready. It was sparked from that coworker telling you you should go into coaching, and looking and feeling that connection when you looked at the program, and it was all right, going from there.
Yeah.
Wow. So what was the transition like for you to becoming an entrepreneur?
I did it during COVID, believe it or not. It will be 3 years ago, March, come 2024. And my plan, Constance, it didn't go just the way I wanted it to go, because we didn't factor in COVID. I don't think any of us did. And my goal was to leave my job in 2020. I sold my house in 2019, and I lived in that house for 15 years.
Wow.
I knew that I wanted total freedom. So I looked at everything that would maybe hinder that in any capacity. And the biggest obstacle, I guess at that time I saw it as an obstacle, was my house. And I traveled 70% of the time in corporate. So it was 60, 70%. I wasn't even living in the house. So I was paying for something that I wasn't even living in. And I started talking to mentors, and they were just like, you really got to look at the big picture, where you're trying to go. Is Charlotte the all end all for you? And those were hard questions at the beginning. But as I committed to the process, the clarity came, right? And I learned a lesson in that moment. Clarity doesn't come before commitment. You have to commit to the process.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, that was a hard lesson. You have to commit to it. I'm not saying commit for the rest of your life, but you have to commit to at least understand what it looks like. And once I committed to, I'm leaving this job, I don't know what it looks like, but I'm quite sure I'll learn. And when I put the house on the market, it sold within 48 hours.
Wow.
And that was in April. And I was like, well, I'm going to just save up my money. 2020, I'm going to quit. Yeah, 2020 came, COVID came.
Yeah.
And the great thing about COVID was the travel stopped. So now I could think clearly. And once, I think Charlotte shut down March of 2020. And that was going to be my second trip of the year. And we had plane tickets purchased, everything. And I got an email. My manager was like, yeah, we're not traveling due to this COVID situation. And we didn't travel anymore. I stopped going to the office, and that gave me the quiet time I needed to really hone in on my business, because I went from having a travel job to a regular, 9 to 5, like everybody else. And that totally changed my plan. And during that time, I started doing coaching and consulting with different firms. Like one of them I worked for was Lyra Health, and they did EAP services for people who were stressed out. And that was as you know, a stressful time for a lot of people.
Yes, very.
And I started coaching in the evenings with people on the West Coast. I didn't even realize that was a thing that could be done because I was on the road so much. And through the coaching in the evenings and on the weekends, I was 1099, so I made my own schedule. That was the bridge for me to see the power of what I could do, because I could do it on my own time. And that was the gateway for me. I started coaching on the evenings and weekends because I had the time. And after doing that for, I want to say 1 year, I left my job in 2021. And that was the way that I was able to leave. I started having these relationships and meeting these people through virtual sessions. And in March, I turned in my resignation.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was wellness like for you during that time of so much transition? You had the transition of not traveling as much. You had the transition of having a more, as you said, 9 to 5 job. And then also building your business on your way to closing that chapter. So kind of being in between, like you had one chapter where it was doing both. So how did you practice wellness?
It was interesting for me because I've been on the go so much. I would always say, and I'm quite sure you've heard people say, well, if I didn't have to do this, I would do this with my time. Well, the lesson I learned during COVID, another lesson I learned, because, the whole commitment versus clarity, that came just before COVID started. But the lesson I learned in COVID was, granted, my body was confined due to all the restrictions we had. We couldn't go anywhere and, everything was closed. My mind was free. So I had the ability to create and think of all these things. Some of them worked and some of them didn't. So wellness for me at that time was at an all-time high. I wasn't traveling. I wasn't stressed out about where I needed to be. And we weren't visiting anybody. So I was at home just thinking of what I wanted my business to look like.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's so interesting because to hear the different ways that individuals were impacted by COVID.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because for some people, 2020 led to a lot of, well, I think for a lot of people, it led to a reassessment or an assessment of their life and what they wanted the remaining chapters of their life to look like.
Right.
And for some people that brought about a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. And it sounds like for you, it brought about that clarity. As you said, that you received that commitment, you did the commitment before receiving the clarity, but 2020 helped you with that clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I had time to explore. Everything else was it was maybe I got a few hours over the weekend before I fly out. But now I have all the time after 5. I'm not traveling. I'm not packing. It was an amazing time for me because I had the ability to sit still and be alone with my thoughts. And I didn't have, for 5 years, I didn't have that.
Okay.
So it was an amazing time for me.
Yeah. Well, once you made that transition to full-time entrepreneurship,
right?
What was that like, and how do you measure wellness as an entrepreneur? Because it's a different beast than, being an entrepreneur. It's, people glamorize it, but it's hard work. So how do you identify wellness as an entrepreneur?
Well, at first, Constance, I'm ashamed to say, I did not. I was terrified because it was the first time in my life that I didn't have a job, quote unquote, right? And the moment I left my job, I promised myself, you're going to take 2 weeks off. It's going to be quiet time. You're going to do some self-care. And then you're going to stop working, because my last day was, I want to say it was like March 15th or something, because I had a 2-week vacation and I said April 1st. I remember that April 1st was going to be when I start working for myself. Well, I was so terrified, Constance. I started taking clients during my 2 weeks. And I just thought, well, maybe 3 won't hurt. And then it led into like 4 or 5. I didn't have boundaries because my job previously set my boundaries. I had a 9 to 5, I had a lunch hour, I had the break. I didn't know how to put those things in place for myself. And that was a hard lesson. I was doing back-to-back coaching sessions. And, COVID, the second year, was a little bit more challenging. And I was doing back-to-back sessions, and those began to weigh on me. In addition to the fear of the transition and what is this going to look like, it took me about 2 to 3 months to wheel it in and actually put boundaries in for times to eat lunch, to log off at night, to not work on the weekends. It was very challenging. And I think too, it was the expectation and I'm quite sure you've heard it before, you got to work hard. Well, I loved coaching, so it didn't seem hard, but I kept thinking I'm not working hard enough. I need to work more hours. I need to have more clients. So that wellness piece, I didn't have it at the beginning, but now I have certain days I do meetings, certain times I don't do I don't take client sessions. But that, to answer your question, it was hard at the beginning because someone else put those boundaries in place. But once I felt the consequences of my decisions, I began to change.
Yes, I like the way you said that, the consequences of your decisions.
Yes.
And I think that is a key point that many entrepreneurs do not think about. It's, you think about, oh, I have the freedom to work for myself. But also with that, when you work for yourself, you have to set those boundaries when you come from an environment, hopefully a healthy environment that sets boundaries, because there are a lot of work environments where there aren't boundaries. But when you have an environment in which there are boundaries, and then you start working for yourself and you want to at least achieve the same level of success, and that depends on how you define it, salary or clients or whatever, then that can make those boundaries kind of loose or non-existent.
Yeah.
So what are some indicators that you have been able to identify for yourself for when you are not practicing wellness?
Oh my gosh. When I start to get sleepy before my sessions, I'm like, I need to go outside. I need to go for a walk or whatnot. That is a big indicator in me not scheduling in time to eat. That was a lesson, because whether we know it or not, your body's saying, hey, Constance, it's time to feed me. Or it's time to get up and move, even if you stretch or something. Those are things that I now pay attention to. And also getting myself in the bed at a decent time and having, I would say, a routine for how you take care of yourself every day. And that may be as simple as you getting up in the morning, whatever you do to, maybe for some it's devotionals or prayer or meditation, whatever that is, making sure that routine is in place for you daily. Because there were times that I would say, oh, I'm going to do this in the morning and not do it. The phone rings or I hear email ping and I see it on my watch. I'm like, oh, I got to get up and do this. Yes. But that disrupts the flow of taking care of me. So the routine and maybe having breakfast. For some, it may be going for a walk or to the gym, but that routine needs to be consistent for you to, set yourself up for success.
Yes, that's so important. The routine, which also can help with boundaries.
Yes.
You have a routine. If your routine is, I shut it down after XY time, then those are also my boundaries, which can also positively impact my wellness. I don't answer emails or phone calls before such and such time frame. That's my routine. Those are my boundaries, and it impacts my wellness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, you've had a really, really great, a varied experience to get to that place of wellness. And I know that you've also authored 3 books. So tell me about the books and where can people find your books?
They can find them on Amazon. Now, the first one, it makes me laugh. I stressed myself out so bad. Constance, the book is only 52 pages, okay? It took over a year. Constance, do the math. 52 pages, it's 360 days in a year. I was so stressed out. That was the first time I worked with the coach. And I named the book No More Excuses. Because at that time in my life, I made a lot of excuses for why I didn't get things done. That book is on Amazon. And the other one I did was it was a collaboration project. And that one was one that was near and dear to my heart, because I got to tell my story of how I started my first business. And it was called Stories of Triumph. That one too is on Amazon. And it's a collaboration project with a lot of entrepreneurs, because like you said, people think entrepreneur is glitz and glamour. Entrepreneur is, granted, it can be that, but it is a lot of work and discipline and commitment and risk taking too. And we wanted to put those stories out there to show people, yes, we've experienced these pitfalls, but we're still here. So that one is out there. And then the last one was a project I actually released on my birthday. Actually, I want to say it was my 42nd birthday, I want to say. And it was called The Blueprint. And through my coaching, I learned that some people were challenged with journaling. It was the pressure of, I gotta write this thing. And the pressure just overwhelmed them, so they didn't do anything. So when I wrote The Blueprint, it was a guided journal for people to fill in the blank, so to speak. And it asked questions like, what was your goal for today? What is your positive statement for yourself today? Mm-hmm. What wins did you have today? And it was it was one page of questions for you to answer. And as a result of answering those pages, if you did it every day for 30 days, that one day, you may look back and be like, gosh, this is the day you got hit by the Mack truck you didn't see coming. Mm-hmm. You can look back and say, you know what? For 3 weeks, I did blah, 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 blah. And that I really did well on that. Wow. And for this day, I did this, because people don't track their wins. We actually go around looking for losses.
Yes.
And if we could switch our way of thinking, the blueprint could actually help you rebuild your life. And that was the purpose of creating the blueprint. And that one I use with all my coaching clients, because I want people to win. Mm-hmm. And be able to feel comfortable saying I won, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's just to yourself, and not focusing on the things you don't have. But all 3 are on Amazon. If you put in Demetra Moore, you'll actually see all of them listed.
Okay. Wow. I definitely want to purchase these books, because especially the blueprint, that sounds so amazing. And I like the book that you discussed where you collaborated with other entrepreneurs, because one of the I think negative things that came out of 2020 was the pressure I felt put on people, where you saw on social media, where it's grind time. You know, if we've got all this downtime, so that means just go, 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 go. Right. Yes, it was an opportunity to hone in your skills, but you also needed to practice wellness, to practice boundaries, to practice downtime. And it didn't feel as though it gave people the permission. Well, first of all, people only showed their highlight reel. Secondly, as an entrepreneur, oh, wow, I've made this amount of money. Quit your job so you can make this amount of money too. And it also, I think, led to people feeling guilty for not going nonstop, or not acknowledging the wins, as you talked about in the blueprint, where you're taking time to really acknowledge your wins. It was more of well, if that's what you did yesterday, then you can do better today, and you can do better next month, and not just sit and just reflect on what have you done well.
Right.
Let's go from there.
Right. And I think that is the one that has been most, I would say, that people reach out to me about, because they're like, Demetra, I didn't remember I did this thing last week, because you didn't write it down. But when you lose, it impacts you in a mental and emotional space.
Yes.
So that, I don't want to say it's trauma for everybody, but that experience, because it was so emotional for you, you remember that. But when you start talking about things that you won, if it wasn't what you called a big win, most people don't even track it. And I'm like, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly.
So you have these little wins that lead to the big win. Why not give yourself credit for them?
Exactly. And I find myself doing that a lot in counseling. I remind my clients of things that others may not see as growth, or see as positive aspects, or shift in mindset. And I remind them, they're like, I never even thought about it like that. Right. Yeah. Yes, we can talk about things that are challenging, but we're also going to talk about where are the areas in which you have had success. Let's look at where you were 6 months ago and where you are today. It doesn't matter if it's an inch or if it's a mile. We're seeing progress. So we're going to point out those successes, because that motivates us to keep going.
Right. And it changed the message too, the narrative that we tell ourselves, because most times people are sometimes comparing themselves, judging themselves. That doesn't fuel you.
No.
So if you want to scale to whatever this next chapter or phase of your life is, you got to have fuel. And the fuel starts with the narrative. So you got to give yourself positive reinforcement to keep moving. And I think remembering you won, X amount of things last month, or maybe you got some, maybe you got some accolades, looking at those things on those days when life is hard. It gives you the fuel to move forward.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, what are some tips that you would share with others who are either entrepreneurs or considering entering into entrepreneurship?
I would say the first lesson I learned is that commitment comes before clarity. Everybody want to know what's going to happen. We all do. It doesn't work that way. Commit to whatever the opportunity is, at least maybe, and I don't want to give a time frame, that may vary depending on what that is you're doing, but at least commit to it long enough to understand what some of the details are. And guess what? If you don't like it, change it. Exactly. But at least make the commitment so you can understand more about what you're getting into. And the second thing I would say is change the narrative about what you believe, think, or feel about yourself. Because if you're like I said, with the fuel, if you're giving yourself negativity, perfectionism, all of these things, it's not going to help you. Because you're your worst critic, and no one wants to walk around feeling horrible. But if you're telling the horrible story, then that's the problem. So make sure that your narrative is empowering to yourself. And the last thing I would say is to check your squad. Because what we hang around impedes what we believe, what we become, how we move, all of that. And if you're surrounding yourself with a squad of people who are not of like mind, and Constance, let me be clear on what like mind is. I have clients that I've worked with who want to be entrepreneurs and they have a job. There's nothing wrong with that. So let me be definitely clear on that. There's nothing wrong with that. And for those who want to stay in your employee role, that's absolutely fine. If you want to climb the corporate ladder, that's fine. But you need to look at the squad who you are around. And if those people are not in agreement with actually moving, not talking about moving, Constance, but actually making strides to go to that next phase, change your squad. You should be so uncomfortable in your squad, you just be quiet and listen the entire time. So if you're doing all the talking, get another squad. So you can feel challenged to stretch yourself. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that it's understanding to the I don't want to say place, but I do think that's where I'm getting. Understanding that you may not be at the same place as others.
Right.
So when I decided to go into private practice, I have other friends who that's not where they were. That's not where they were. I didn't want to go into private practice for a long time because I had a image of that means I'm doing the same thing day after day after day. And I don't want to do that. But it was understanding that there are certain conversations that I could have with individuals who were in that same mindset. So the people around me who were in private practice are also thinking about going into private practice, then we could have certain conversations that were not as limiting. We actually formed and I'm blanking on the name of the group, but we had a group where we wanted to do different things. And we were not all going into private practice, but there were just different endeavors that we wanted to do that were different than what the space that we were currently in, which led to different conversations. We had meetings on a regular basis. We had agendas and we checked on our progress. Where are you with developing your website? Where are you with developing this? So we were able to hold each other accountable. And that was important because all of us had the same mindset that we were in a place that we did not we no longer want it to remain. However, if there are individuals who are in that group and they're like, nah, I'm cool being here, then you're not going to get much progress. And so you have to be mindful. And that's what, what I'm hearing you say. You have to be mindful of who is around you, who has the same vision. And if they have a different vision, that's fine. But understanding that vision, if for them, it's keeping them in a place that they're comfortable in, but you're no longer comfortable in that place, then that can impact your growth as well.
Absolutely. And I heard I want to say it was on something I was listening to on YouTube. It was one of those, inspirational, motivational type videos. And the guy that was speaking said, the biggest obstacle to success is comfort. And I just thought, wow.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. And he said, we say things like, when people talk about finances, I just want to be comfortable. I just, when I get this XYZ place in my job or in my career, I'll be comfortable. But until you got comfortable, you were striving, right? So comfort is like the wall, like you stop. And he I never heard it put that way before. And when he said that, I thought, And he said not to be restless, but to understand that your life affords you so many beautiful opportunities that you always have the ability to explore them and wonder about them. Not just say, well, I'm here and, this is cozy for me and I'm just going to stay here for the rest of my days, because the moment you stop growing, you can't add any more value.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
Well, that was just great.
Thank you.
There's no other word for it. And I love the name is this the name of your overall business? More out of life?
Yeah, that's the name of my business.
I love that. A play on your last name, but it's also just that last statement regarding wanting more and pushing yourself and not getting out of your comfort zone because you want more out of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think everyone deserves that opportunity, whether they take it or not. You know that you have the option to.
Yes.
And I just think it's so important to be empowered with choice and, decisions and being able to talk about those, as you said, with your groups and so forth.
It is. So I'm going to list all of the ways in which individuals can find you on social media and also how they can join your newsletter.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. This was so much fun. Thank you for allowing me to share insight with your audience. I appreciate it. And I'm just excited about the opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much for engaging in this very, very important conversation, because as I said, there's a lot of talk about become an entrepreneur, work for yourself, but not a lot of talk about what that actually looks like, and just being prepared for that transition. And so I know this conversation will help many people in addition to your books, and I'm going to link that as well so people can have an opportunity to purchase some books and learn some more.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.